Peace to everybody, back with another video. This is protesters enter Minneapolis police station, set fires. Oh man, I don't know why would these people do that. Go into the police station to set a fire. But then again, you know, it's always something. I find this one hard to believe, really, because Associated Press, I don't know, they are not much of a truth teller either. But as you can see here in the pictures, somebody holding up a sign that says "No justice, no peace." Protesters angered by the death of George Floyd, a handcuffed black man who died while in police custody, gained access to a Minneapolis police precinct on Thursday, the third straight night of violent protests spreading beyond the city. Yeah, so these protesters, allegedly they were angered by the death of George Floyd. He was a handcuffed black man who died while in police custody. He was gained access to a Minneapolis police precinct on Thursday, the third straight night of violent protests spreading beyond the city. So, live stream videos showed the protesters entering the building where fire alarms blared and sprinklers ran ablaze were set. Police appeared to have left the building, located in the neighborhood not far from where Floyd died Monday. A spokesman didn't immediately respond to messages left by the Associated Press. Alright, so the police left the building. All of them did. There's a live stream video show the protesters entering the building where fire alarms blared and sprinklers ran as blazes were set. Police appeared to have left the building, so they all left the building. We're getting out of here. Located in the neighborhood not far from where Floyd died Monday. And this is what a spokesperson didn't immediately respond to a message left by the Associated Press. And of course, you know, nobody really wants to talk to them. In footage recorded by a bystander, Floyd can be seen pleading that he can't breathe as Officer Derek Chauvin, who is white, kneels on his neck. As minutes pass, Floyd slowly stops talking and moving. Yeah, so you got this officer who's pale Caucasian, because I don't like to use the word white. I really don't. So I'd rather say pale Caucasian. There is a footage recorded by a bystander. Floyd can be seen pleading that he can't breathe as Officer Derek Chauvin, who is pale Caucasian, kneels on his neck as minutes passed. And of course, Floyd has slowly stops talking and moving. Dozens of businesses across the Twin Cities were boarding up their windows and doors Thursday in an effort to prevent looting, with the Minneapolis-based Target announcing it was temporarily closing 24 area stores. Minneapolis shut down nearly its entire light rail system and all bus services through Sunday out of safety concerns. Yeah, so the buses were not allowed to go anywhere around that area, so they had to direct them somewhere else, I guess. Dozens of businesses across the Twin Cities were boarding up their windows, so I had no idea. I forgot that St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota were twin cities. I forgot all about that, and I didn't even know until somebody who was live streaming on Facebook had said something about it. On Thursday, in an effort to prevent looting, with the Minneapolis-based Target announcing it was temporarily closing 24 area stores. So they were closing 24 area stores. So that means who knows how many states they were closing their Target temporarily. But the one in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that was the worst burned and looting and rioting ever. It got caught on fire after people had cleared everything out that store, put things in shopping carts. They used a cart thing like somebody had like 7 televisions. I mean, like 7 flat screen televisions. Minneapolis shut down nearly its entire light rail system. So yeah, that's what they did. In St. Paul, clouds of smoke hung in the air as police armed with batons and wearing gas masks and body armor kept a watchful eye on protesters along one of the city's main commercial corridors, where firefighters also sprayed water onto a series of small fires. At one point, officers stood in line in front of a Target trying to keep out looters who were also smashing windows of other businesses. Yeah, oh my God, yes, they did. Well, you really can't blame the black community, because I know it'll be mostly the pale Caucasian community. It'll be them, really. Goodwill windows were broken. They set a fire to whatever business it was. I think another AutoZone, an AutoZone in St. Paul. And I mean, there's just a lot going on right now. There was a let's see, what else? One of those dumpsters, they were on fire as well. It's just pathetic. And here's the result of, I don't know, I think either Minneapolis or St. Paul, one of the two places. Hundreds of demonstrators returned Thursday to the Minneapolis neighborhood at the center of the violence, where the nighttime scene veered between an angry protest and a street party. At one point, a band playing in a parking lot across from the police 3rd precinct. The focus of the protest broke into a punk version of Bob Marley's Redemption song. Nearby demonstrators carried clothing mannequins from a looted Target and threw them onto a burning car. Later, a building fire erupted nearby. Yeah, so they had like hundreds of demonstrators. They did return to where it happened at, and of course it was at the center where the violence had started, where the nighttime scene veered between an angry protest and a street party. So they was having everything over there, street parties, everything. Of course, they broke into a punk version of Bob Marley's Redemption song. The demonstrators carried clothing mannequins from a looted Target and threw them onto a burning car. So there was a car was burning there in Minneapolis too. Later, a building fire erupted nearby as well. But elsewhere in Minneapolis, thousands of peaceful demonstrators marched through the streets calling for justice. Yeah, so there's more the peaceful demonstrators marched through the streets calling for justice. So the peaceful ones are not the violent ones. But when you get the violent ones, then you know what time it is. Early Thursday, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz called in the National Guard to try to stem the violence. So we know, like I told you in my last video, Tim Walz is deep state. And he's called in the National Guard to try to stem the violence. No, he did not. Donald Trump was the one who called for the National Guard, literally. He's the one that's asking for the FBI and the DOJ to investigate the death of George Floyd. So Tim Walz, who's the governor of Minnesota, did no such thing. So this whole thing, this whole part right here is a lie, saying Tim Walz called in the National Guard to try to stem the violence. No, he did not. It was Donald Trump who called. Floyd's death has deeply shaken Minneapolis and sparked protests in cities across the U.S. Local leaders have repeatedly urged demonstrators to avoid violence. So the peaceful ones, they were urged to avoid the violence, but while the noisy ones, they could just do whatever they want. They say, we're going to party and this and that. Floyd's death has deeply shaken Minneapolis and sparked protests in cities across the U.S. Right now, Ohio, Memphis, Louisville, Kentucky, they're with their protests right now, and there's one other state I forgot. Well, California had theirs. Please stay home. Please do not come here to protest. Please keep the focus on George Floyd, on advancing our movement, and on preventing this from ever happening again, tweeted St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter, who is black. So he's telling people to please stay home. Please do not come here to protest. Please keep the focus on George Floyd, on advancing our movement and preventing this from ever happening again. And this is tweeted out by St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter, who is black. So he's telling people to stay home. Don't come there whatsoever. Don't come out to protest. Erica Edson, 20, was among thousands of people who gathered outside government offices in downtown Minneapolis while organizers had called a peaceful protest. Many protesters wore masks because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but there were few attempts at social distancing. Well, first of all, the social distancing is full of crap. It's not real. The shadow governments do not own us. They literally do not own us. Erica Edson, who's 20 years old, was among thousands of people who gathered outside government offices, and this is in downtown Minneapolis, where organizers had called a peaceful protest. Now, when you hear the word organizers, then you know it's staged. It's not a real protest or anything like that. It's just a peaceful protest. That's all it is. But that doesn't mean you got to go around tearing up buildings or anything like that. And what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota last night, I think that pretty much did it. Anson, who is black, described seeing her 14 and 11-year-old brothers tackled by Minneapolis police years ago because officers mistakenly presumed the boys had guns. She said she had been at every single protest since Floyd's death and worried about raising children who could be vulnerable in police encounters. So Anson is the 20-year-old female. She has a 14 and 11. She describes seeing her 14 and 11-year-old brothers tackled by Minneapolis police years ago. So we don't know how many years ago that was, because officers mistakenly presumed the boys had guns. So that's what it was resulting to. She says she had been at every single protest since Floyd's death and worried about raising children. So she's worried about raising children because of what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and of course what Floyd's death. We don't want to be here fighting against everyone. We don't want anyone to be hurt. We don't want to cause any damage, she said. We just want the police officer to be held accountable. And I agree with her. There should never have been any riots, violence, anything. There should have never been any of that. And she does want the officer to be held accountable. So the cop who allegedly killed George Floyd is sitting at home with ordering his pizzas every day. And the other officers are at home too, ordering their foods every day, and they're saying that, oh well, they're on paid administrative leave. No, they were fired immediately Tuesday. Hennepin County Sheriff David Hutchison said the rally had been peaceful and there had been no arrests by late evening. Yeah, so this is Hennepin County Sheriff David Hutchison. He did say the rally had been peaceful and there had been no arrests by late evening, so there was no arrest whatsoever. The governor's order did not say how many guard members were mobilized or whether they would be in service Thursday night. After calling in the guard, Waltz urged widespread changes in the wake of Floyd's death. Well, see, when you see the National Guard, you know that means martial law, literally. No ands, ifs, and buts about it either. The governor's order did not say how many guard members. Of course, they're not going to tell you because they were all there in Minneapolis, Minnesota last night by the police at the police station. Because they were just waiting behind the police officers who were wearing riot gear for no reason at all, because the protesters did not even touch the police officers at the in Minneapolis when all this allegedly broke out. It is time to rebuild the city, rebuild our justice system, and rebuild the relationship between law enforcement and those they're charged to protect, Waltz said. Well, it'd be kind of hard to replace Minneapolis, Minnesota. I mean, there's a lot of tearing down, rebuilding and everything, but rebuilding the justice system, no, because it's been corrupt for years, in case anybody didn't know. And rebuild the relationship between law enforcement and those they're charged to protect, Waltz said. Much of the Minneapolis violence occurred in the Longfellow neighborhood, where protesters converged on the precinct station of the police who arrested Floyd, in a strip mall across the street from the 3rd precinct station. The windows in nearly every business had been smashed, from the large Target department store at one end of the Planet Fitness gym at the other. Only the 24-hour laundromat appeared to have escaped unscathed. So, well, at least the laundromat was still around. At least they didn't touch that, because people need to go in there and have clean clothes to wash them in a washer and dryer. So at least that was saved. That was spared. But Target, Planet Fitness gym, and there were other businesses as well. All the windows were smashed. AutoZone was burnt to the ground. Everything. But the only one that was still standing was the 24-hour laundromat to have escaped unscathed. So if there were people in there, they can't do that because there's washers and dryers in the laundromat. So at least they left that alone. Why us? Demanded a large expanse of red graffiti scrawled on the wall of the Target. A Wendy's restaurant across the street was charred almost beyond recognition. So yeah, so Wendy's got charred as well, almost beyond recognition. And of course, this the graffiti writing, it says "Why us?" Is demanded a large expanse of red graffiti scrawled on the wall of the Target. Among the casualties of the overnight fires, a 6-story building under construction that was to provide nearly 200 apartments of affordable housing. Yeah, so that 6-story building that was under construction, that went up in flames. That's that goodbye. We're gone. That was caught on fire too, and there would have been nearly 200 apartments in there. But that got caught on fire as well. We're burning our own neighborhood, said a distraught Deanna Brown, a 24-year-old woman standing with a friend outside the precinct station, where a small group of protesters were shouting at a dozen or so stone-faced police officers in riot gear. This is where we live, where we shot, and they destroyed it. No officers could be seen beyond the station. Yeah, you couldn't even see the officers beyond the station because all the smoke was all over the place from the businesses that were on fire. Of course, the police officers in riot gear, this 24-year-old woman, she said, we're burning our own neighborhood. She said a distraught Deanna Brown. She said that outside the precinct station, where a small group of protesters were shouting at a dozen or so stone-faced police officers in riot gear. So these cops, they wasn't afraid at all. They just, who cares? She also said, this is where we live, where we shop, and they destroyed it. No officers could be seen beyond the station. No, you couldn't even see them with all the smoke. What that cop did was wrong, but I'm scared now, Brown said. Yeah, so now she's scared because of what the cop had did to George Floyd. Others in the crowd saw something different in the wreckage. So wow, so now there was something different in the wreckage. I wonder what it could have been that was different in the wreckage this time. Protesters destroyed property because the system is broken, said a young man who identified himself only by his nickname, Cash, and who said he had been in the streets during the violence. He dismissed the idea that the destruction would hurt residents of the largely black neighborhood. Yeah, so there's this guy, he goes by the nickname Cash. He said he had been in the streets during the violence. He's been around since the violence broke out Tuesday night. They're making money off us, he said angrily, as the owners of the destroyed stores. He laughed when asked if he had joined in the looting or violence. I didn't break anything. Yeah, so Cash said he didn't break nothing. So he also says they're making money off of us, he said angrily of the owners of the destroyed stores. So yeah, so when the system is broken, that these crooked people are making money off of you because they don't respect you and they never will. The protests that began Wednesday night and extended into Thursday were more violent than Tuesday's, which included skirmishes between offices and protesters, but no widespread property damage. So there was no widespread property damage, because after what happened in the inner city of Minneapolis, that was the worst damage ever, but it just lucky it didn't go beyond that. The protests that began Wednesday night and extended into Thursday, they were more violent than Tuesdays, so that's what happened. Mayor Jacob Frey appealed for calm, but the city's response to the protests was quickly questioned as things started spiraling into violence. If the strategy was to keep residents safe, it failed. City council member Jeremiah Ellison, who is black, tweeted, "Prevent property damage." It failed. On Thursday, he urged police to leave the scene of the overnight violence, saying their presence brings people into the streets. So the police had to leave the scene. He urged Jeremiah. He had to urge police to leave the scene of the overnight violence. So they had to leave. He said, "Look, you got to get out of there now. I'm urging you, all of the police officers, to get out now." So they abandoned the police station. So this is why the alleged protesters had access to get into the police station and burn it down. But Eric Cowell, I'm just going to say Eric K. But Eric K., a police captain in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray riots in 2015, generally supported the Minneapolis police strategy to avoid confrontations with protesters when possible, saying heavy-handed police responses are only met with more violence. So you got Eric K. is a police captain in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray riots in 2015, generally supported the Minneapolis police strategy. Minneapolis is totally destroyed in this inner city of it. There's nothing really left except for the 24-hour laundromat. Lucky that did not caught on fire. Nobody wants to see their city on fire, but at the same time, you don't want to see citizens injured by the very police department they are protesting, he says. So he is saying that nobody wants to see their city on fire. Well, apparently it happened, allegedly. And of course, you know that everything is gone in Minneapolis, just about. Protests have also spread to other U.S. cities. In New York City, protesters defied New York's COVID-19 prohibition on public gatherings Thursday, clashing with police while demonstrators blocked traffic in downtown Denver. A day earlier, demonstrators had taken to the streets in Los Angeles and Memphis. So there was other U.S. cities as well. New York City had protesters defied New York's COVID-19 prohibition. Now, well, you know what? New York City is a big city, and they are tired of Andrew Cuomo's garbage as well. And you know what? I don't blame them to defy them, but there's New York City, Los Angeles, Memphis, Denver. There's others. Ohio, another one. But these alleged protests are coming to your town, like it or not. And I pray that it doesn't get to all 50 states, because it would be just a travesty for it. Amid the violence in Minneapolis, a man was found fatally shot Wednesday night near a pawn shop, possibly by the owner, authorities said. Yes, so there was a man who was shot near a pawn shop by the owner, and this is what the authorities are saying. Fire crews responded to about 30 intentionally set blazes, and multiple fire trucks were damaged by rocks and other projectiles. The fire department said no one was hurt by the blazes. So now these alleged protesters, they had threw rocks and other projectiles at them at the fire department. Fire crews responded to about 30 intentionally set blazes, and multiple fire trucks were damaged as well. The city on Thursday released a transcript of the 911 call that brought police to the grocery store where Floyd was arrested. The caller described someone paying with a counterfeit bill, with workers rushing outside to find the man sitting on a van. The caller described the man as awfully drunk and he's not in control of himself. Asked by the 911 operator whether the man was under the influence of something, the caller said, "Something like that, yes. He is not acting right." Police said Floyd matched the caller's description of the suspect. So now you gotta think back. Why would this guy, who is an employee at the store where George Floyd was found at by the police and arrested, because they literally dragged him out of his car. The guy at the store was the one who called the police, and he said, well, the caller said he described someone paying with a counterfeit bill. What counterfeit bill was there? What counterfeit bill was there if George Floyd had a job for 5 years and he was a security guard for those 5 years? You tell me that. There was no way George Floyd could have gave the employee a counterfeit bill. No way at all. But the employee of the store did not care. He didn't even bother to apologize to George Floyd or nothing. So George Floyd had died by the officer who was kneeling on his neck and had put a lot of pressure on him. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI in Minneapolis said Thursday they were conducting a robust criminal investigation into the death. President Donald Trump has said he had asked an investigation to be expected. Yes, so the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI in Minneapolis did say Thursday they were conducting a robust criminal investigation into the death. Of course, Mr. Trump has said he had asked an investigation to be expedited. The FBI has also investigated whether Floyd's civil rights were violated. Yes, if you're in handcuffs, you think the police are not going to violate your rights, your civil rights? Yes, they will, because the police had no right to put their hands on George Floyd whatsoever. George Floyd was handcuffed and he was on the ground. And the bystanders told the police to get off of him, and of course the officer did not listen at all. Jovian, the officer who kneeled on Floyd's neck, was fired Tuesday with 3 other officers involved in the arrest. The next day, the mayor called for Jovian to be criminally charged. He also appealed for the activation of the National Guard. Yeah, so the officer who allegedly kneeled on George Floyd's neck was fired Tuesday because the video leaked out that day after the incident happened on Monday. So the next day, that's when the video was leaked out. And of course, whoever leaked it out, which I have a feeling it'll probably be the deep state, because knowing them, they'll do anything. That they where George Floyd had passed away, and it's a sad thing that this officer did what he did, and it's terrible. Leave your comments below. I am out.